we are back after a small lunch break. The fourth interview of day 2 at Staking Summit. I'm sitting here with the one and only Chainyoda. Yeah, I mean, it's actually my first interview with you after I met you 5 years ago in Lisbon or something.
Yeah, I
during
was
the
at
conference
Abe
week.
then. That's right. Really nice to see you again. Welcome to Dubai.
Thank you so much. Means a lot. And yeah, you were like one of the first figures I've seen in the Ethereum ecosystem. And now my question to you is, what does Ethereum need to do to get back on track?
Yeah, so Ethereum needs to focus on its cult, right? We need to rebuild the cult, the tribe, and not worry too much about technology or product because all that stuff is going to take time.
So you say, and then what does a cult mean for you? What, like, there are like, I think also like some different definitions for it. There are also some nice ideas around the cult, but there are also like bad connotations.
So
What is a cult?
every really successful organization is a cult. So I worked in some cults, like Goldman Sachs was a cult. And if you left Goldman, you felt really bad about yourself, and I did, and I felt really bad about myself. They made you regret, and they made you feel very proud of being in that thing. And it was a great firm, right? And then Barclays Capital was not a cult. It was a bank, and everyone is in there to do a job and make money. But there was no mission, no sense of purpose, no ideals, no leaders, nothing bigger than yourself. So the first sign of being in a cult is that there is a mission, or there is a leader or something that you assign a higher value to than to you, to your own interests, and so on, right? That's now people. So mission oriented organizations, when they succeed, they have a sense of, and the second thing is a very strong sense of identity, right? So you work for Goldman Sachs and you have a sense of identity, you have a status. The third thing is status. You have a status in that organization. You are a vice president, you're a managing director, you're a partner, and there is a certain pride and status that comes with it, like being on the Monad Discord or Mega ETH Discord or things like that, right? So status is very important. And then the fourth important thing is there is an enemy. You can't really build a cult without having a very strong enemy, right? So when Ethereum was succeeding and it was winning, and before Vitalik took everyone to Farcaster, yeah, which is a shame, Solana was the enemy, and before that Avalanche was the enemy. All L1s were the enemy.
Cardano.
Bitcoin was the enemy. Cardano. Oh yes, the evil Cardano and XRP, right? So,
Yes,
so exactly. So you got to have enemies too, because it's very hard to unite India unless there is a Pakistan, and unite Pakistan unless there is India, right? Or unite America unless there is a Russia or a China and things like that. So having a very strong sense of who your enemies are is also very important. And so cults are exclusive, right? So when you join a cult, you're not part of something else. When you just become technology, then you lose that sense of cult. So right now, all the discussion in Ethereum is around, oh, how do we get TPS, or how do we get scaling, and what about the EOF, or honestly, none of that stuff matters, right? XRP has no technology. Well, they have some technology, but it's very little. But the cult is very strong. Hyperliquid is starting to become a cult, and Solana is not quite there yet, right? They're still very tech focused. Cardano is such a strong cult. So Bitcoin, the biggest money cult in the whole wide world, right? I mean, look at how well that's doing. So Ethereum needs to focus on rebuilding the tribe, not and the cult, and not so much on technology, because everything we promised, right, will take 3 years to build, and then people will get tired of all these promises. Like they're already getting tired, right? Like Beam Chain, oh yeah, we're gonna pile in. That's just not the way to go. The way to go is to rebuild the cult and make it very, very strong, and that requires a sense of identity. And right now, the identity is diluted because are you Ethereum Jesse? Are you Ethereum Shoyao? Are you Stephen Goldfeder's Ethereum or Sandeep's Ethereum? Which Ethereum are you? And that's like Cosmos.
Oh yeah. And as like someone who spent almost too much time in Cosmos, the
There's two of us.
the cosmosification of Ethereum is my biggest fear for my ETH stack.
Yeah, and you know what? I didn't see it coming. So the only guy who saw it, the only guys who saw it coming are the Cosmos guys. Meher Roy was the first one who coined the term, of course, one who said Cosmosification of Ethereum. I met the guy at DevCon 1. He is the first guy who saw it coming. Then Zaki caught on, and a lot of Cosmos guys saw, and they said, fuck, we've been through this, don't do it. And here we are, right?
And then there are other people saying, oh, Cosmos was ahead of his time. No.
No. Well, Cosmos won, right? When it comes to technology and the architecture, Cosmos is winning, right? Modularity is that, and roll-up centric roadmap is that, and horizontal scaling is that. IBC interop, the things that Ethereum guys didn't even think of. We did Cosmos and we did it badly, right? So we Cosmosified Ethereum, but we didn't think of interop from the beginning. Ethereum tried to solve shared security. We thought we had solved shared security. With Ethereum, Ethereum was the token that was going to provide shared security, but we didn't align the incentives of roll-up tokens like L2 tokens, right, with L1 token, because now you have people who have 10 million worth of ARB and 1 million worth of ETH. Obviously, they represent which interest they represent, right? So the social layer is really fragmented. So we did Cosmos and we did it badly. I mean,
it's something in between.
There's something in between. There is Polkadot, right? So Polkadot, Gavin thought of a lot of things. He didn't execute well, right? A lot of the ideas like parachain auctions didn't work out very well. But he actually, and then the interop protocol didn't work out that well. And then they did a terrible job of BD and all that. And but the thing is still a force. So people are still building BitTensor on Substrate and whatnot, and there is still this central token which is supposed to align incentives. Now Ethereum is starting to see the light, right? They're going in the, like Vitalik is tweeting about RISC-V VM, and so Gavin is going around saying, "Oh shit, look, I told you." So yeah, but Gavin, you didn't ship. So on the ecosystem side, so I think we are in a very interesting place where I think people are Ethereum kind of, because here is the thing, Ethereum does not have 3 years. Right? So Ethereum, if we don't recover this thing in a year, then it becomes an IBM. We do not have the luxury of 3 years, and people are very slow. We need to recover, and the token is what, the tribe, the cult is what we can be recovered in the short term. The technology, product roadmap, and such a complex engineering setup will take a long time to deliver.
Yeah, and at DEF CON in Bangkok last year, the new roadmap was released with, I think, 2028 or 2029 or something. So your argument is that we don't have enough time for this.
Yeah, but that's, I'm sorry, you're European, I'm British, but, born in India, but British, so I shouldn't be fighting Europe, but this type of thinking is very European,
yeah,
right? So, which is like, we have infinite time in the world, and people will continue to buy our purses.
Let's go on vacation in Italy first.
Vacation, and there's the Zoogs philosophy, right? That's just not, and that's the thing. I mean, I think Ethereum is a bubble, right? So people are still don't realize how intense the competition is and how quickly disruption can happen. Now, from an investor standpoint, I'm seeing a lot of traction on Alt L1 DeFi, right? Like Solana DeFi, Sui DeFi, Aptos DeFi. There's more and more and more happening, and that's where the developers are going now. Investors are following, right? So a lot of young, talented people are going. So I think people don't realize how quickly things can change, and things have changed, right? So, but like some of these old OG ETH philosophers are like the Japanese soldiers who have no idea what's going on around the island, and unless you have real money in the game, skin in the game, you don't actually see it. So yeah, I think Ethereum does not have the luxury of time that people think it has. Yeah, Justin Drake, my friend, is, especially, I think, and then there is this internal organization which, like, of the Ethereum Foundation, people are thinking Danny Ryan will save us, and Aya is, and, all this. No one cares, man. The only thing people care about is, where are the young developers going and creators going, where the VC money is following, where the users are, and where the MEV traction is. So now, there are very, very smart people, right? So my friends, Robert and Tarun, and when XRP starts to get traction, we start to look for, is anything happening in the XRP ecosystem? So right now, people are looking at what's happening in the Sui ecosystem. So token price has its own, and I think, and the token
best
is
marketing tool.
It's the most important thing. I mean, the tribe, like US dollar, right? US dollar is the identity of the United States of America. Chinese renminbi is a very, very strong part of the identity of the Chinese state. Ethereum is the identity of the network state. Ether, not Ethereum the blockchain, but Ether the token. So it's not even, money is part of identity of tribes. And once you dilute the identity, which is kind of what happened in Cosmos, right? Because Ethan Buckman, another one of my great friends, and I never agreed with, which was, Atom is not money. But if Atom is not money, you start to lose people. And Atom was pretty decent money, right? You staked Atom and worth $10, and you ended up getting like $80, $90 of airdrops. And that was pretty amazing, right? For a lot of people. So we held on to Atom like with our dear lives. And with Ethereum, you don't even see that. So
we had a cold for exactly 6 months.
Yes, but we have made money for 2 years, right? But with Ethereum, Starknet, no airdrops. Scroll, no airdrops. Jesse is doing his own thing. So there is a lot of insiderism in the Ethereum culture, which comes from monopoly mindset, having this sense of already won. That really needs a purge, right? I think, and I hang out with Solana guys, Aptos guys, and all like Avail. I work for Avail, Celestia guys, whoever else. And with these new emerging competitive ecosystems that really have to prove themselves, you don't see that type of insider outsider mindset. They're much more meritocratic because that's the only way we can succeed. Whereas with Ethereum, you see, there are people who are like Hayden, Uniswap, or Optimism, which are part of the inner circle, or Xiao and Polygon, Arbitrum, they're not part of the inner circle, or Eigenlayer is not part of the inner circle. So the first thing is to drop all this bullshit, right, and really create a meritocracy of the best builders. And I think that cultural purge or cleaning needs to come straight from our Politburo in Zug, and it needs to come straight from Vitalik, right? And then once we start to change this culture, I think the rest of that Ethereum will start to recover. But I don't think people realize how short the time is on that.
Me neither. But you mentioned something in the beginning. What's important to have a cult, which is a strong leader, a common enemy.
That's right.
And a clear mission. So let's start in the beginning. Let's take these 3 pillars. First pillar, what does Ethereum stand for today, in your opinion? Or does it stand for something at all? And what needs to change, or what could Ethereum stand for again?
I think the first thing is to stand for token price, right? And I know I sound very shallow, and I don't sound like a visionary philosopher, and with what about the ideals, and what about so all that.
It's to 10K. Yeah.
Definitely it's to 10K, right? And here is why. Because it's the speculators who feed the developers, right? If the community is not winning, right? If you're ordinary retail people and users and airdrop farmers and KOLs and your Discord members, all of those ordinary people who are just new, the noobs, are not winning, then the rest of it is not going to win, right? That's the number one thing. I think once Bonk started to go up, and once Jupiter, Jito, these airdrops did really well, Solana started to take off like nobody's business, right? And we've seen this with Ethereum also in 2017, when
2020 Uni. Uni was like
Uni was amazing, right?
ENS.
But I go a step back. So 2016, 17, Ethereum printed a lot of millionaires, right? And those are the biggest cult members of Ethereum. You'd see Victor Bunin, and the bankless guys came in a bit later. But the biggest cult members are the people who did very well by building on Ethereum or by serving the community. Sassano, all these guys, right? And you see that type of tribalism even with Sandeep and others who essentially did very well on Ethereum. You don't see that with the people who were left out of that. So I was doing enterprise blockchain, so I'm not as so I have much more of a diversified exposure to a lot of different things. But I was at Consensus, so you see, I'm much more tied to DeFi and Aave, because that's where I started to build my, wealth and career and everything. So most people don't want to accept this reality, but some of these incentives are biological, and they impact our thinking, right? So Solana is the same thing. I mean, you see a lot of people doing well on Bonk, and they hang out, and they're doing well on WIF, and it's part of the trenches, and then the idealism start to develop. Right, so the idealism and the pragmatism of it all need to go together, right? So I think we've gotten into this airy-fairy space where we have forgotten who pays the bills, and the bills are paid by speculators, right? They need to do well. So the token needs to do well, and right now, and that money token, as I said, is central to identity. My identity is not my Ethereum address. People think my identity is my ENS address, and everyone on Twitter had chainyoda.eth and, RSA.eth and Sassano.eth. And yeah, sure, that's part of the identity. But the number one thing that unites people across their incentives in Ethereum is the token, right? XRP is the identity of the Ripple community. But BTC, a lot of Bitcoiners completely hate each other. It's the most violent, toxic community. A lot of people completely hate each other. The one thing that aligns them is number go up, right? Whether it's Sailor or anti-Sailor or Lynn Alden or Udi Wertheimer or the podcasters. Udi hates the podcasters. Podcasters hate Udi. But they are aligned by one thing.
Bitcoin.
Right? The token. So the token money is central to identity. In fact, David Birch has a book called Identity is the New Money, right? So that's the first thing.
And just sorry to interrupt you, but also people who are not even in Bitcoin. So even Ethereum people are happy if Bitcoin goes up because that means altcoins also might
In
want to.
fact, absolutely, because Bitcoin goes up, that means the whole industry does well. Well, that's kind of broken right now, but
Yeah.
in general, but if Ethereum, Bitcoin is going down, you can be pretty sure that we are all getting poor, right? So, so Bitcoin is sort of the identity of the industry, right? It's so core to the identity that everyone is incentivized for Bitcoin to do well. So identity is the number one thing. Now, the second thing is you need an enemy, right? So when
Who's our enemy right now? I'm a little bit confused, to be honest.
Solana is a good enemy for Ethereum, right? I mean, because they're the ones who are winning. They're getting developers, they're getting traction. They have a fantastic culture, and they're building things that currently don't exist on Ethereum, or have they're getting a lot more transaction volume on swaps and things like that. There is a lot of MEV, REV. It's a very youthful type of culture, and they're more. They have a very different technology. It's also part of the identity, right? That SVM. If they had gone down the EVM path, there would have been yet another Alto L1. And they did try. There was Neon and a bunch of other stuff. But, so technology is the second part of the identity, but it's less important. The money is the money token is the number one thing. You put the Benjamin Franklin on the dollar bill, and that's part of your identity, right? So similarly, you put Mahatma Gandhi, and you know that it's an Indian coin, so it's not that complicated. So the token is first, and then and you have to align everyone's incentives around that, right? And so how do we solve for blob fees? Bro, make the fucking ETH token. I'm sorry, yeah, make the ETH token go up. That's how you align. That's the number one thing. But because now it's like a standards body, and Jesse has a different set of incentives than Steven, than Sandeep, and everyone else. So it's complicated, right? And that's always intrinsic to anything that's like Cosmos, right? But I think Gavin tried to solve for it. He saw that coming much earlier. So we have to solve that problem. I don't know how to solve it. I'm not smart enough, but that needs to be solved. Enemy, Solana is a great enemy. Bitcoin, some people are trying to make Bitcoin an enemy because here is what went wrong. We punched down on Solana. Right? When Solana was $8, whatever, or $30, we punched down on Solana, but everyone left for Farcaster. So you don't have the market power to, the mind share power to actually extinguish this enemy, but you are essentially promoting them. So that was a mistake. I think everyone leaving for Farcaster meant we lost control of the narrative, right? And I've been talking about it for a long time, but that's the second thing. The third thing, so enemy Solana is a good enemy. Bitcoin is a bad enemy because no one wants Bitcoin to do badly.
Yeah.
No one. While it's punching up, Solana was not a serious threat when Bankless and everyone else was going all in after Solana, right? Validator economics, this and that. We made them look very, very important, right? And now Solana is in such a strong position. I mean, the culture is, I hang out with a lot of Solana teams. I invest in Solana ecosystem.
They also have an ETF on the horizon, so you have to take them seriously.
But most importantly, the culture is where Ethereum culture was in 2017, 2018. I hang out in the Solana community. It's fantastic, man. The vibes are so good, right? The creativity, the Ethereum guys like to say that, Solana is only for meme coins. Are you kidding me? So I have invested in a bunch of things, and none of them is a meme coin. So, right, and you see a lot of good devs build in that ecosystem for two reasons. One, the culture is meritocratic, right? As in, all Solana wants you to do is to make money for Solana's users, right? As in, build great products, get traction, make Solana look good. It's very clear, right? So there is no base, arbitrum, none of that, and it's very meritocratic. No one cares if you're aligned with Ethereum's Solana's values, or you're a friend of, or Justin Drake likes you, or Vitalik likes you. No one cares. It's extremely meritocratic, and that's a deadly enemy, right? So Solana is a serious threat now. It wasn't a serious threat when everyone was flooding Solana. Now Bitcoin, bad enemy because no one wants Bitcoin to do badly, right? The third thing is
their leader.
The leader, yeah. I mean,
is Vitalik.
I don't see a plan B. I don't see a plan B, right? I think Vitalik has to, as the Brits used to say, is take back control. Look, there were only two leaders that survived, right? There was Vitalik, who was the spiritual leader, and there was the Joe Lubin, who was the operational, financial, marketing leader of Ethereum, right? And then everyone hated Joe because they thought he was making money, and Bro, of course he was making. He was doing so well. He did so much for Ethereum. Without him, Ethereum would not have made it, right? He protected Ethereum from legal threats. He built the first few apps on Ethereum. He built the entire like indexer, wallet, the core things that we assume are part of blockchains today. He marketed Ethereum through Enterprise Ethereum Alliance. He marketed
Blockchain parody.
yeah, I mean, absolutely incredible ecosystem builder. Total legend, right? I'm sure you can be critical of him like you can be critical of everyone else. But you think Vitalik and the philosophers would have made Ethereum work? Absolutely not, right? So I think now obviously everyone hated Joe because he was doing well as a result of his hard work, and Ethereum has this European socialist vibe, right? Where we start to punish people for doing well. So okay, paradigm, okay, punish them. Sriram eigenlayer, oh no, or now that we'll start hating on base because it's becoming successful, whatever. So there is this weird thing about Ethereum where Lido, we all hated Lido because
it's too centralized.
And that's not an American vibe, right? Americans love their winners and they try to destroy them through technical disruption. But we don't try to socialist disrupt them and do affirmative action type of thing. So I don't know why I say we because I think I spend too much time with Americans, but I'm more European, right? I'm British. So, anyways, and Indian. So I think there is this cultural thing about Ethereum, which is, bring down Lido, bring down Eigenlayer, bring down our Aave, our most successful winners, or DeFi. We don't want to pay attention to DeFi. It's just, I just don't get it. I think Ethereum needs to get out of Europe, and Europe needs to get out of Ethereum.
Yeah, I can definitely resonate with that because like it really feels that way. Also, if you talk about these obvious things, so to say, people in Ethereum start to strongly disagree with that. If you talk about, hey, we need to focus more on the tokenomics of ETH and then these types of things, people react very allergic to terms like that.
It's beneath us because we already made money, right? So So the Ethereum vibe is that now we have risen above all these materialistic, mundane considerations. Now we're going to think about, World War II resistant technology, mass extinction resistant things, and, pure verifiability. So we created the myth of purity of Ethereum. Ethereum was, when Ethereum launched as an ICO, Bitcoiners called it a scam. They talked about pre-mine, and that FUD went on for a very long time. So Vitalik has always been a very, spiritual person, and he is genuine and sincere in his beliefs. He has never done anything to the contrary, right? So, but Ethereum wasn't just built on purity, and it was an ICO.
Yeah.
Ethereum's biggest use case was ICOs. Most ICOs were scams, right? In the DeFi summer, most of our coins were food coins and scams and rug pulls. Then meme coins happened on Ethereum before they happened anywhere else. Pepe.
Yeah.
What's
Chihuahua,
Harry Potter, Chihuahua, Shiba Inu, and you name it. So is anything happening on Solana or anywhere else that hasn't happened on Ethereum? No. So we created this myth of purity, right? Of this holier than thou religious, and it's part of cult building, right? Because you got to make people feel better and give them a higher sense of mission and purpose. So that's all good. It makes sense, right? We created these church-like tribes. So we had tattoos of the Ethereum logo, and we were dancing around the fire and making goat sack. Not really, but you know what I mean, right? So I think you have to build a religion, and Ethereum was incredibly effective at building a religion. We built an incredibly phenomenal internet tribe.
Ultrasound money.
It's pure before ultrasound money, right? I think ultrasound money it did really well. Ultrasound money did really, really well for a while, but it didn't fit with roll-up centric roadmap, and we did not change the narrative before the burn EIP15. So the narrative got invalidated, and we did not change it, right? So yeah, but here is the thing: when the roll-up centric roadmap came out, I didn't challenge it. I believed in it. You were not supposed to challenge anything. That's what a good cult looks like, right? So once the leaders have spoken, you do not challenge it, right? Like President Xi speaks, you do not challenge it. That's what a good tribe, I know it sounds very counterintuitive, but if everyone is arguing with everyone, that's just technology, man. It's a rational group of people, right? We are that's a bunch of scientists. Scientists argue with each other all the time. That's what they're supposed to do. But that's not a religion. Felt a fantastic religion. So when we roll-up centric roadmap, I believed in it. Ethereum alignment, I hated it from day one. Yeah, because it felt very oppressive, and like Ethereum alignment sounded more like giving advisory tokens to people and getting a stamp from the social layer. So I hated that one. But everything Vitalik said, it was the word of God, man. I mean, it was so that's what a good tribe looks like, right? So like there's this Satoshi guy who can do no wrong, and I think that thing has gone away now because everyone has their own tribes, sub tribes, and subcultures, and they have different incentives. So whenever Vitalik says something, it's good for either it's good for your bags or it's bad for your bags or it's different than your ideology. And so Vitalik has also become just a guy, right? Because so I don't want Vitalik to be just guy. I want Vitalik to be
God.
Something like that, right? Like President Xi or Lenin or or Donald Trump for MAGA. Right? So the leader has in any effective or Lloyd Blankfein or Henry Paulson.
I think he's a little bit more like Angela Merkel for Germany.
Yeah, it doesn't work, right? Doesn't work. Margaret Thatcher was a very effective leader. So I think Vitalik was an incredibly effective leader. But I know what happened. I think we have kind of lost track of that tribe and cult and narrative, which Bitcoin still has. Bitcoins might hate each other all day, but Satoshi is above all that. I never see, say, people saying Satoshi, did something silly or whatever. Yeah. And not being around helps with that, but obviously we're not going to get that, right? So I think Ethereum needs to get back control of, and at some point there's going to be a purge. If you leave it, in my experience, DAO governance is a disaster.
Yeah, sure. Like governance, like decentralized governance is horrible. Like I'm from the Cosmos ecosystem. I don't want to talk about governance anymore.
Yeah, Aave governance works because there is now a dictator there.
Yeah, right? Dictator. You needed a dictator.
Mark Zeller is a very strong force of nature, right? So he's a democratically elected dictator. He has a bunch of delegated votes, but you don't fuck around with that guy. And he's got his, he is aligned with the interests of the community, which is token holders, and he's an incredibly smart and high integrity person. But
very aggressive to everything that's against.
Yeah, exactly. Like look at his fights.
Eliminated.
Look at his fights with Gauntlet, right, or with Polygon. That's my guy.
Yeah.
Right. So with strong leaders, right? Not Donald Trump, right? Yeah. If you're not MAGA, and then you see the folly of his ways and whatnot, but Fox News, right? So the propaganda machinery that you build around this strong leader. I mean, all of these brainwashing techniques that you see with cults, and I've studied cults in a lot of detail, and I've been part of Amway and some religious things and a bunch of things. So I have some personal experiences and Ethereum and Goldman Sachs. So I think we kind of need to take back control and establish a very clear narrative. If you don't agree with the narrative, you're like John Charbonneau. If you listen to everyone, right? Like democracy is, oh God, this is not a democracy. We're building a tribe on the internet. If you don't agree with the narrative, fuck off, right? So I'm sorry. So if John Charbonneau doesn't agree, he's not part of the thing. If Max Resnick doesn't agree, he's not part of the thing. If Chainyoda doesn't agree, Ajit doesn't agree, get the fuck out of here, right? I think, because if you don't have a strong sense of identity and a clear direction and said, this is who we are and this is who we are going to be, if you don't like it, do something else. If it's a democratic Indian parliament type of setup and there is no Narendra Modi to kind of, take back control, it's not going to work. I mean, I'm sorry, democracies don't work. In that sense, I mean, democracies are good at...
Democracy slows down a lot of things. I think the perfect example for that actually is my home country, Germany. I think we're the most democratic country in the world.
Yeah, as of now. There was a time that wasn't the case, yep.
Yeah, yeah, but we also you also see it if something is like too democratic, everyone has a say in everything. Bureaucracy tends to be like much bigger, and that's how Ethereum feels to me. That's the exactly super democratic, bureaucratic.
Also look, anything good happens in Ethereum. Now there is a guy like John or Max or someone who doesn't agree with it, right? We pay too much attention to that. Just don't, right? I mean, that's like Cosmos.
Yeah.
If you want to debate logic all day,
you don't debate anything.
It don't work. But you don't see that in XRP. You don't see that in Cardano. You don't see that in Bitcoin, right? There is no logical debate happening in Bitcoin about Michael Saylor buying too many Bitcoin or, whether governments are, it's strictly against the ideals of Bitcoin to have a guy bailing out Bitcoin every day. It's strictly against the ideals of Bitcoin, original ideals of Bitcoin for Donald Trump and Eric Trump to be pumping the hell out of it.
But what?
Or BlackRock to be buying most of it. But Bitcoiners know what the tribe stands for, and it's
BTC goes up.
The BTC goes up, and BTC dominates, and BTC is the number one coin. All the alts die in their world. whatever else, right? But that wasn't always the case. When there was a time when Bitcoin had the same issues as Ethereum, right? Last cycle. So what was going on is that there were BTC maxis who had a lot of altcoin bags, like Pompliano, right? So he would come to consensus in 2018 and he was buying a bunch of ICOs. That diluted the whole thing around Bitcoin, right? So a lot of people who were supposed to be the leaders of the Bitcoin tribe had incentives outside of Bitcoin. It's like, being the Chinese leader and having a very heavy investment in US real estate and then ending up in the trade war. I mean, obviously so there is a conflict of interest there, right? So we see a lot of those types of, and there were podcasters debating their interests and whatever, and Bitcoin had no idea where it was going. Michael Saylor comes about, right, from nowhere and unites all of Bitcoin. I don't know if he was on coke or whatever, man, but he unites all of Bitcoin around just one single thing. Bitcoin is gonna win, right? Bitcoin is gonna is the only thing. Everyone else can go to zero. I know it sounds no one wants to hear this stuff, right? Because it's so impure.
Plain.
Because it's so impure.
Yeah.
Right? It doesn't sound very idealistic or philosophical.
That sounds like Moon Boy on YouTube.
That's right.
at 2
But
a.m.
look at what's actually happening, right? As an empiricist, so think about what's actually going on. Now, there are a lot of people who believe in the ideals of Bitcoin, right? Now, those guys are benefiting from what Michael Saylor is doing, because it furthers the cause of Bitcoin being a better money than US dollar or whatever else. It strengthens the narrative. It invites developers to build things on Bitcoin layer 2s, Babylon, restaking, all that stuff, staking stuff. It makes Bitcoin a more valuable asset in Sui, Aptos, Solana, Ethereum, whatever else. There's nothing that, and people realize it. So it sounds very counterintuitive, but the things that are apparently against the ideals of Bitcoin, like governments, getting involved and BlackRock buying and TradFi, owning more and more Bitcoin instead of people owning Bitcoin, is actually helping Bitcoin and the Bitcoin ecosystem, and it's bringing it in more into a sovereign money kind of narrative. So I think some things are simpler than they are if we are just willing to see reality for what it is. And I'm not saying look, the hard thing in this industry is to preserve your idealism, right, while also operating in the real world, right? So for example, on one hand, Ethereum is an ICO coin, which is not very idealistic, right? There is pre-mine, there are insiders, there is all this other stuff if we go back in reality. But there is also this great sense of idealism around Ethereum, right? Which is a part of its superpower. Vitalik's idealism, without Vitalik's idealism, Ethereum would have descended into a complete, money grab, right? And it kind of did for a while. Anthony Diorio retired, Charles Hoskinson retired.
It's a stoic safe land.
They were like purely money-seeking people in the Ethereum core developer team, and a lot of them disappeared as soon as they got rich. Vitalik and Joe stuck around, right? So Gavin continued to build. Somewhere else, because he was not winning the architecture debates inside Ethereum, and he had a clear idea of what Ethereum's challenges were. Cosmos, Ethan Buckman, I met him at DevCon 1, so they continued on to do other things and build some really valuable technology that came back into Ethereum. So without the idealism, this stuff doesn't work, right? Because otherwise, we might as well go back to banking, right? So you need the idealism, but you have to still operate in reality and be empirically, and there was that in Ethereum, right? Vitalik has been an incredibly pragmatic guy. He is a master of narrative, right? So he is like ultrasound money was well timed, and there was a whole bunch of Vitalik pitched battles with Bitcoiners. He made pragmatic decisions around the DAO, right? The DAO, we chose to go with the Ethereum Classic is the immutable blockchain. Yeah. Right. Ethereum is not the immutable blockchain. That was the mutant or the mutated blockchain, right? So there was a very pragmatic decision. So Ethereum has made a lot of pragmatic decisions in the past, right? So now, what's happened now? Why have we gotten high on our own supply and started to believe that Ethereum has some kind of God-given right, and it's purer than everyone else, and all the alt elements are worse? They're just at an earlier point in their journey, right? So it's a healthy belief to have if you can hold your community together. Like you hang with Cardano guys, which I've done recently. Like people are trying to revive Cardano and all that, and they have a very strong sense of a shared identity and whatnot. And you can argue with them all day about smart contracts on Cardano, and they're not going to listen to you. right? Or XRP, and who is actually using it, and they're not going to listen to you. So it's good to have that level of tribal religious belief and cult, but you have to hold it together. You can't let it get diluted by vested interests and different L2s and all that, because then it starts to fragment the community, and then you start to create new churches. Like you go from Catholicism to Protestant church and Methodist and Presbyterian and Quakers and all of that. That only works if you have size, right? And you still need a Jesus, and you still need a core ideology around it, right? You need the Holy Bible, at least some New Testament version, which has some mutations, but that works if you have a lot of size, right? But crypto is not growing.
Yeah.
So the Church of Ethereum fragmenting before we have size, the total people who have ever touched crypto is maybe 100 million. I don't know. The people who have used on-chain products is probably 20 million, and a lot of them are pump fund buyers or moonshot buyers, not Ethereum users, FYI, right? So like Donald Trump coin buyers a lot of people have never been on-chain, and they've mostly been on Binance or things like that, right? So this is such a small section of the internet that you can't let it fragment at that scale, otherwise it starts to fall apart.
Question. You mentioned something very interesting also with the L2s. Is maybe the new architecture of Ethereum also a little bit hindering? Because I imagine to become like almost an ETH maxi when I got my Uniswap airdrop for interacting on Ethereum.
A lot of people did. A lot of people did.
Yeah, and I did everything on the mainnet. Everything I did on Ethereum mainnet.
I
and
paid
now it's
so much
expensive.
gas. I paid so much gas. You know why? Because it was worth paying gas.
Yes.
So here is what happened.
But like all the newcomers, they can't afford to pay that much. So do you think it was like a mistake to focus too much on the L2 map and roadmap, and don't start focusing on scaling the actual?
It's not that. It's a cultural issue. So the reason I was willing to spend that on gas, one is because even when it was expensive for me, right, was because there was hope of airdrop. Right, so it's an investment.
Yeah.
So now, but then Ethereum guys go around and calling airdrop hunters e-beggars, and start rewarding our core devs and insiders and Bankless podcast and whoever else. And the ordinary users are being called e-beggars and what was this, hyperlane prostitutes or whatever else.
Airdrop parents.
Airdrop hunters, whatever, right? So you can't disrespect your users. They're literally spending their time to use the thing that no one needs, right? They're willing to explore. They are the early pioneers. They're they're your first users. Please respect them, right? So I think, and Cosmos did a much better job of it. Like if you stake Datum, you got a bunch of airdrop, right?
Yeah.
So at least have respect. Now we started to believe in our own thing, and we started to disrespect our speculators, right? So Ethereum Foundation was selling ETH when like all the Chinese KOLs and traders are hurting, and you see a lot of FUD from some very popular accounts, right? And I translate them from Chinese to English, and I see what they're saying. And you can't be selling ETH when they're hurting, right? Because that's how you lose your community. So there is no awareness of who pays the bills, right? It's the speculators that pay the bills. It's not the philosophers that pay the bills. I'm sorry. They have never paid the bills. When was the last time a philosopher paid anyone's bills, right? So I think that's, so there is this disconnect between, and you know how that started? Ethereum core devs won the battle against the miners. So the miners are the investors and money people, and they're speculating. They're essentially trying to make money, right? And they're investing in this network, in the growth of this network, and trying to profit from it. And then there are these philosophers and Zug, and they obviously have other interests. And there is so ETH pause. The merge created a huge disconnect between the speculators and the money people, and then there was this sense of monopoly that, okay, Ethereum has already won. It can do no wrong. We don't need these airdrop hunters. We don't need these farmers.
We grow automatically. We have this God-given right to, win. And guess what? Where do they go then? They chase, exactly. They chase Jupiter airdrop, Jito airdrop, right? They chase Radium, Orca, and whatever else. Now these are the same people who got Uniswap airdrop. Yeah.
Compound liquidity mining, right? Curve airdrop, all the food coins. Yearn Finance.
The rise of Aave.
How can you not know who your users are?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so we started to lose respect, and then a part of that was because venture capital was so freely available to all these philosophy research coin projects, right? So you could raise at 500 million, 800 million without actually having, whatever, So, and if you look at where the users came from, eigenlayer points was incredibly successful, right? So I think Sriram, being around in the industry, had that respect and empathy for you know who the users really are and what they're trying to do, right? And this is a financial system. Blockchains are financial systems, and so I think they did a great job with the now Celestia modular money, right? So avail airdrops. So there is a bunch of things. I think we kind of a lot of teams have had this respect for empathy for who the users are. And then there is this whole other insider thing, which ZK is the end game, and the research is enough or technology is enough, and we will just write some papers and Vitalik will stamp them and the token will go to $10 billion because Vitalik said something nice. Like, even now when Vitalik says something nice about, what's this thing, like ENS, and it goes up 30%. So there was a time when I went to Hong Kong with Sandeep and they said, you guys are not, you guys don't seem endorsed by Ethereum Foundation, right? Whereas the Scroll guys seem to be very close to Ethereum Foundation. So, and everything that's close to Ethereum Foundation does very well. There was a time when that happened, right?
Yeah.
Now that's how you start to corrupt the system and corrupt the cult, because now it's insiders and outsiders, and who is close to who, and the way we translate that is by saying aligned with the values, right? But all we are saying is these are our people, or these are the insiders, and everyone else is like Sandeep is the outsider and Sriram is the outsider, or Hayden is the insider, and all that, right? So that culture is a natural product of monopoly. When you have already won, then you can have all sorts of luxury. You can have you can hire Bankless as an advisor and say, okay, you can have 0.5%. Just say nice things about me on Bankless podcast, and token will go up, right? So Ethereum culture got by monopoly, and because it was the 99% dominant or 90% dominant smart contract platform, it obviously had to happen, right? I mean, in hindsight. But now, obviously, because we're not in the same shape, now this party is no longer in power, and the steel mill is no longer the dominant IBM thing it used to be. It's time to clean up. So we have to. But I don't think anyone in the philosophy house listens to people like Fede, right? Fede is or Paradigm, right? Or Jump Crypto. Everyone in Ethereum hates Jump, right? But Jump had a shit ton of they were farming, they were using the chain, they were making a market on the chain. They had oracles on the chain. They're bringing liquidity. They held a lot of tokens. They held 400, 500 million of tokens. Our other biggest holder is Justin Sun, biggest farmer in every protocol. 4 billion in Aave, 4 billion in Compound, biggest restaker in Eigenlayer. Also the guy who built Tether, right? So, or Tron. And, so sure, is he so you may like him, you may dislike him, but he is, these speculators are what brought us this far. They have brought Bitcoin this far. Bitcoin's first users were drug dealers. There is the dichotomy of, the values and the reality of things, right? There is always that. I mean, it's true for communism, capitalism. There is always, and it's a dialectic. I'm not going to go too deep into philosophy because it'll just run over people's heads, including mine. But the thing is, you have to somehow keep your idealism, right? Ethereum Foundation didn't support DeFi. Who are our biggest apps and users?
DeFi.
Aave, Uniswap, Curve, Yearn Finance, Buffer, Morpho.
I think the only non-DeFi one is maybe OpenSea.
That's DeFi, bro. I mean, what do we do there? We trade tokens. We trade.
Yeah,
NFTs.
but it's still something else. So I think the only application I can think of from on top of my head that is not DeFi like Banker, Aave, Uniswap, then I think OpenSea.
Yeah, but it's still buying, selling, minting. So in some ways it's kind of like not that far, right? But okay, if you want even ENS, right? People were trading ENS tokens. Now it's supposed to be an identity thing, but if you really want identity, make it like what non-transferable, right? Make it soul bound like Mega ETH NFTs. If that's what you want to do, they didn't do that. Obviously, we want people to speculate, right? We didn't want people to just hold to their ENS token. People were betting on 2-digit numbers, 3-digit numbers, 4-digit numbers. But when we go out to public, we have this religious conflict inside us where we know that everyone is speculating, and that's how the network works. That's what pays the bills for validators, MEV, right? That's what keeps the network sustainable. But we feel guilty about it, right? But that's bullshit. I mean, if you're building a financial system, finance has 3 things. Payments, right? You got to move the money, transferability. The second thing is swap, right? You need to be able to exchange assets. And the third thing is leverage. So these three things are the pillars of finance. And if you're building a network for finance, which is what Ethereum is, what do you think is going to happen? People will speculate, people will transfer, and people will, borrow and lend. I mean, they will create leverage. It's the natural scheme of things. Otherwise, what's wrong with Bitcoin and Tether, right?
Yeah.
So I think there is this disconnect from reality as to who the users are. And to be fair to John Charbonneau and Max Resnick, the biggest Ethereum critics, they did say that before they left on to do other things, right? And they tried to convince a lot of people to see reality. And the Ethereum Foundation, we do DevCon. There is no DeFi track on there. I mean, so on one hand, everybody is using DeFi. DeFi is what Ethereum does. And on the other hand, we don't want it. We want people to do Farcaster. Guess what Farcaster is doing now? Farcaster is doing airdrops.
Yeah.
People are trading things on Farcaster. People are minting these things on Zora. Farcaster is also DeFi. I'm sorry. Hey, guys, it's DeFi. It's all DeFi. And if you don't like it, maybe you shouldn't be in the blockchain business.
Yeah, it's all a casino.
And not just that. I mean, look, finance is a casino, right? Finance has three parts. One is payments, as I said. The second is speculation, swap, and the third is leverage. So it's
That's
finance.
the only thing that really turns people on.
How do you drive capitalism without casino? How do you drive human progress without casino, right? How can you benefit so much from casino? How can you end up with $1 billion from essentially building the best internet casino in the world, which is Ethereum, and still feel guilty of it? I mean, come on, guys, give me a break, right? I think so now that's what Solana has done. These are young people. They're not monopoly yet, right? So they go ahead and build a faster casino. Is it a better casino? Maybe not, because you still can't do the kind of lending protocols on Solana. I have not seen it, or perps on Solana, in the same way that you do on Hyperliquid and stuff, or on Arbitrum. But I mean, these are financial systems. We came from Bitcoin. We solved colored coins, created a generic framework for colored coins called Ethereum, right? And now we have conflict about casino. I mean, what drives capitalism? I mean, what do you think capitalism, the speculation, this casino, these three elements of finance are what provide a service to the real economy. While it's true that we need a real economy, right, on top of these financial rails for it to be sustainable, we need buying and selling of goods like iPads, and we need to finance, home purchases, we need to finance manufacturing and all those things. This is the finance layer of the internet. There is other things on the internet for all that, right? We will build banking systems, we build e-commerce. So now the path to doing that is to build the best financial layer and start, and that's what Solana is trying to do now. When I go to Solana hackathons and stuff, I see a lot of these Web2 product people who are building the things they're building, like, decentralized Uber, which obviously sounds like somebody high on mushrooms, but, or decentralized Tinder, or decentralized this and that, right? Or Facebook or Twitter, whatever, like Farcaster. But the financial rails, or the dopamine rails, like all the dot funds, is the blockchain, is the smart contracts, right? So I think at some point you have to have a sense of what this thing is really about. And maybe we'll find something else, right? I mean, we don't know. But as of now, if it's working, double down on it, right? Build a better, safer financial system, build a more scalable financial system, build a more institutional friendly financial system. Triple down on it. I mean, DeFi is the only way. Yeah, and especially the lending side of it, right? The yield games and all this other complex collateralization, rehypothecation, those types of things that we already see in finance, it's all possible on Ethereum. So unless we triple down on it on protocols like Aave and, Morpho and Uniswap and, perps like Hyperliquid and things like that, Ethereum is going to have a really hard time.
Man, always enjoy talking to you. Where can people keep up with you to your thesis?
I can barely keep up with myself. So I'm Chainyoda on Twitter and Chainyoda on Telegram. So if you see Chainyoda anywhere on Solana, Ethereum, wherever else, that's usually me. Thank you. Very nice to meet you, sir. Great to see you.
The pleasure was mine, and thank you so much for this conversation. It was very insightful.
I hope I didn't say too much. I still
Ethereum still has 1 year.
I still want to be employed and invest.
Ethereum still has a year, so let's see.
Hope this is useful.
See you guys soon. Thank you so much.
Right.